welcome to TTalk, where Tulane athletes get to tell their stories. Today, we're pleased to have none other than John Authors, college basketball player for Tulane, All-American. He also played first baseman for the Tulane baseball team. He was drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks. He is also a member of Tulane's Athletics Hall of Fame, the Greater New Orleans Sports Hall of Fame, and the Louisiana Basketball Hall of Fame. He went on to have a very successful real estate career, and he has been a friend and mentor to many. Thanks for coming on to Tea Talk, John.
Well, I would love to start first by saying hello, Carmen.
Hello, how you
Hey,
guys doing?
what's
Hey,
that?
John.
Oh, hey, hi,
Yeah,
is that Carmen?
That's Carmen.
Hey,
well,
How
Carmen.
are you?
I'm good, Carmen. Thank you.
Great.
well, John, one of the things we've done a few of these, and and one thing that became readily apparent is that these are little mini memoirs. I mean, for all the people that we interview,
Okay,
and stuff, and we can be as comprehensive as anybody wants to be, in kind of developing their personal stories. And I think this iteration is just about I mean your life, but through the Tulane stuff. But I would also like to go, since you and I have been friends since then, and continue to be, I mean, through the whole trail, because I knew you when, you were that superstar basketballer in New Orleans, and then as you went on to be that superstar in Milwaukee, with the little kid sidekick you brought along with you, tall guy, and through life, I know that you've had a great career and a great family and all that kind of stuff. So I'd like to try and just kind of bullet point, you through the whole experience to
sure,
start.
sure.
Um, so I mean, so tell me about the beginning, man. I mean, tell me what it was like, being you as a young kid in New Orleans.
Well,
What the atmosphere was, what your family was, etc.
right. I think you and I had a lot in common back, as we grew up being New Orleanians, Harold. And I was born uptown. I was born not far from the campus. Went to St. Henry Grammar School. Played a lot of ball at little Nord playgrounds. And that was at Wisner Playground in Nord. And everything I learned, and frankly, I learned more at Wisner in 10, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 than I learned from anybody after that. Because I had a coach named Ronnie Oakran who was from New Orleans, who taught me all the basics and the fundamentals. And I had an older brother who was really good with sharing knowledge with me, who played basketball and baseball. So I had a good foundation from the very beginning as a kid growing up. And then, of course, I went to De La Salle, and I loved De La Salle. Had a great time at De La Salle. Ended up being the student body president, and
Mm.
which was fun just to be, at least I think it was a popularity contest because I played all the sports and all this stuff. But I still enjoyed leading the campus life over at De La Salle all those years. It was fun. And then, of course, was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to go to Tulane. Like there's no way I can go to Tulane without a scholarship. But I was fortunate and got that scholarship. And, the rest was just a Tulane history and career, and um, very enjoyable times. I mean, I always tell people, particularly when I'm involved in a speech of any sort, that, you get a lot of plaques and you get a lot of trophies and things of playing sports. But I view the plaques, Harold, like a front door of a safe. And you open that door, and in that safe is everybody you've ever met or dealt with throughout your life and your career. You know what I'm talking about. Everyone knows that.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it's more than just the athletics. It's the people. And that's the one thing that has stayed with me through my years after post graduation, after Tulane, the Bucks, everybody. It's just the people and people like you. So that's the fortunate part, and the part I love the most about being an athlete and reaping the benefits of being that athlete.
Gotcha. Tell me more about your parents, man.
Well, my dad was a fireman. My dad was a fireman. Um,
Mhm.
he worked two jobs. He was a TV repairman and a fireman, and he would
Mm.
work at night on TVs. And sometimes I was lucky enough that I'd get to go with him, and I'd be the guy that would handle hold the toolbox. And he would say to me, the most important job here is holding that toolbox. So I would hold that toolbox. I wouldn't let it go. But he was working on TVs and repairing those as a side job. And then he was a fireman, um, retired as a captain in the New Orleans Fire Department.
Wow.
And was a wonderful guy. My dad was wonderful. My mom was from the New Orleans. My dad was actually a little bit of a semi-pro baseball player, so he got to play some ball. I think the genes are my dad and my mom. My mom played on a national championship women's soft indoor ball team, and
Wow.
fortunately, my mom saved one picture. We have one picture of the team, and it was probably Mom was probably 16, probably 1938, and they won the national championship of this big ball, the indoor ball, I think they call it, and traveled up to Chicago to play and won a tournament. So I had the right genes, I guess. I had two parents who were both athletic, both supportive, obviously, and then my brother. My older brother Bill played at De La Salle and at Tulane. He played freshman ball at Tulane only. He didn't get to play varsity ball, but he was an athlete. And quite often, Billy would introduce me and he'd say, and my brother Johnny, blah, 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 he said, but I want you all to know I was the first one of the family who could dunk. So he could jump. But Billy was a good player. Was a good team player. So I had my brother supporting me. But I lived in uptown New Orleans, but I didn't live in uptown New Orleans. I lived uptown, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun and enjoyed it thoroughly. And
Gotcha.
wouldn't give it back for anything.
What street did you live on
I
as a
lived
young
on
person?
Robert and Annunciation. I don't know if
Okay.
you've.
Wow.
It's about 2 blocks from Domalices and about 5 blocks from Hanson Snowballs. And
We know it very well.
the playground was a block and a half away. And during the summers, my mom would say, "Okay, here's your 35 cents," and I would spend the day at the playground. I'd get a hamburger and a Coke, and then she'd say, "You just have to be home when the lights are off at the playground. You better be home." So they
Yeah.
turned the lights off at 9:30 at night, and I would run so fast that block and a half to my house to get home because I wanted to make sure I wasn't late. But yeah, that's how my days were spent in the summers, and then of course sports took over a lot of that time. Played basketball and baseball only. Didn't play any other sports, and but really enjoyed my time uptown. And I still have friends from the old neighborhood who I see and run into them, and it's a lot of good memories.
Gotcha. Peculiar question. I'm asking this question for the youngsters on this call. And stuff. When you and I were kids, the leagues, sports leagues, and as you mentioned in your Bridgeport, Connecticut your trip being the first time you actually encountered another African American athlete. When we were kids growing up, I mean, we lived in proximity to each other, but in very segregated separate societies. What is your memory about those days? And what are your thoughts about your memories about those days?
Well, my thoughts are this. Unfortunately, it was something that I have to say I really wasn't cognizant of in terms of a black or African American white situation. I mean, it was the playground. I would go to the playground and never really gave it a thought that I didn't even compete against the good African American athletes that were around at that time. Although I'm finally aware of it now, and I'm going to tell you a quick story, anecdotally, which
Mhm.
really hit home with me. About 15 years ago, I was in commercial real estate, so I did a lot of real estate. But I had a painter that I worked with, Harold, and he was very nice, very efficient. And one day, he was an African American, and one day I said, Ronald, come on inside and I'll take care of what I owe you. And so and I looked at Ronald and I said, Ronald, you are about my age. Where'd you grow up? He said, oh, I grew up on Annunciation and Bordeaux.
Mm,
I grew up on Robert and Annunciation, Harold. That's 5, 6
yeah.
blocks away. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And I said, wow. I said, I used to spend all my days at Wisner. I said, I'm telling you, I played there all the days of my life. He said, I know we couldn't get in. So that just, you know, I don't know
That-
how
that-
it just hit me hard.
I hear you. Yeah, and obviously I had a similar reality on the other side.
Okay,
Uh,
where did you grow up? Where,
Calliope, I
yep.
actually was born
Okay.
6 blocks from Tulane's campus at Oak and Burdett.
Okay.
Uh,
Uh,
and then when I was 5, we moved to Calliope Projects.
mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, literally, but across the driveway from Booker T. Washington High School.
Okay.
And so, but at the other end of the projects was Rosenwald, which was the Nord facility, and that was my reality. That was my entire world.
Okay.
I mean, until high school. And so yeah, similar circumstances. We were in close proximity, but totally separated
Yeah. Yeah.
in reality. Yeah. So yeah. So then you go to Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Now you really now look. We're talking now. You're going back to like 1959, Harold.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, I was fortunate. The Nord got me the opportunity to play on 2 international tournaments. One in Wichita, Kansas, when I was about 11 years old, and one in Bridgeport, Connecticut, when I was 12, which is where I met Calvin Murphy. That was the first time when I was 12 years old. We were playing in a tournament in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Murphy played for Niagara, of course, and Norwalk, Connecticut. Excuse me. He went to Niagara in college, but he played
Mhm.
in a city of Norwalk, Connecticut, and he was the first black African American that I'd ever been on a court with. And Calvin was tiny back then. I mean, the size limit was like 5'8" was the max you could be anyway. I think Calvin was probably only 5'2" back then, 5'3". But obviously, we we never really experienced the reality of playing everyone at the same time, meaning, and that was true for Nord, but it was true for me for high school, as you recall, Harold. My senior
Mhm.
year, we were still segregated.
Right.
So I didn't get, and you didn't get, and I didn't get the opportunity to compete until that next year, which, obviously I was at Tulane by then. So that
Mhm.
that was something that, and I think I remember this, and you will know this, Harold. Isaiah King,
Right.
really good player, right? And
Yep.
um, there was somebody else on that team, but those guys, I would love to have the opportunity to have played, in games with and against those guys, because those Isaiah was really highly rated, if you remember,
I do.
as an All-American, and he was up rated higher than me on the All-American list. But I did,
Mhm.
not, reflective in reflection, it certainly really makes me feel like, boy, that would have been fun. That would have been a kick to be able to really be at that point where you're playing the best of the best. So, yeah, I think I missed out on that. But again, like I said, I wouldn't trade it at this point for anything. But at the same token, I think
Right.
guys like me missed out on that opportunity, especially through the high school years.
Gotcha. And since you mentioned Isaiah, I'll continue the story. Uh, we actually had the opportunity to play with your teammate, your friend Billy Fitzgerald. In that game that ultimately became the Passing Glory movie, and so which I think people still hold out as ostensibly the first integrated athletic contest in the history of the state. We were all lumped together at that time. Isaiah was a senior, I was a sophomore. Again, when that happened. So that was our reality, man. Just breaking through it. But and I've got to say this about you, and I hope it doesn't embarrass you too much. Yeah, Isaiah was a great player, and stuff. But I think, and I've got to say this out loud. Uh, you are probably the best player that I ever played with. Uh,
Well, thanks.
and yeah, but yeah, I see you
You're one
blushing.
of the nicest guys I ever played with, Harold. Now you know
And you're one of the biggest liars I ever met.
that.
You got to tell these people the truth. So,
There you go. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
no,
Appreciate that.
and again, I mean, I appreciate having the opportunity to be your teammate. And so, because I mean, again, at Tulane it was obviously a whole nother level. And my only regret is that we didn't have much time as
Yeah, we did. We had that one year. Yeah, yeah. That is fine. What I'm trying. I hate to make this a question and answer thing, but Harold, when you came, they outlawed the dunk. Remember? Uh, yeah. So Harold comes in, and we're all excited because we've got a guy that can dominate the boards, can go up, we can alley oop, and he can dunk. And then that year, Alcindor, of course, is the same year as me, and he's a sophomore, and they banned the dunk because of Alcindor and the domination that he had in the games when he could dunk. And that they took that away from you too. They didn't. I mean, they obviously didn't realize it, but here's a guy like you who, and I'm assuming you probably had to adjust your game quite a bit, because, playing around the rim like you did, as much as you did getting in high school and then get to college and all of a sudden you've got to start shooting layups. I mean, that's a big difference, right? So anyway, yeah, that was, yeah. Well, fortunately you could play defense and you could still rebound, but offensively it did inhibit. There's no question. But that's part of what all this whole legacy is about, Harold. We live through it and we make the best of it. I felt good, and the game you're referring to was the first time we played Pete Maravich. That's when Pistol Pete came to town, and they put a picture on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and I was in it, Billy was in it, Pete was in it, Fitzgerald was in it, Pete was in it all multiple times. I can't remember if you were on it or not, but we were all kind of somewhat in the sideline, but it was all about Pete, frankly, at the cover. But we still were the team that was on the cover with them when we played LSU. Okay. Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. So yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's come up over the years. People remember that and ask, and that's probably if we're going to talk a little bit about the basketball at Tulane, that year when you were a freshman, I would have been a junior, and that would have been Pete's first year, his sophomore year, and I fondly remember that we split with him that year. He got no less than 50 in each game, of course, and then one of the fondest memories I have of Tulane is our senior year, Harold, when you were there and we beat them twice in our senior year. And I'm going to throw a little bouquet at you, Harold. Harold had probably the best game that I've ever had a teammate have in Baton Rouge. We played a double overtime. We beat LSU 101-99. And Harold probably knows better than I, but Harold had 32 points and 22 rebounds. Does that sound right? Yeah, yeah. And we won in double overtime. I fouled out. I don't know if you fouled out, but I fouled out in the second overtime. Uh, anyway, so then we went on and we played them again later in the year, and we were at home, of course, and that was a highlight for us that year. We beat them by 14. Pete got 66, but it was irrelevant because we had five guys beating one guy, so that was a fun. That was one my best recollection or my fondest recollection probably is that senior game, Harold, when we beat them by 14 in Tulane Arena, which held 5,500 people at the time. Now it's been cut back with all the renovations and the fire code, and we had people sitting on the sidelines, on the floor, and it was just a wonderful experience. I'll never forget it. But that was truly a highlight there.
Was in Tulane gym when Pete came in. I was a freshman, and your teammates. I mean, what I remember most is Dan Mosier, who I'm sure you remember, and Mitch Urbanski. But we had a bunch of guys on that team, Indiana kind of kids. It looked like they came right out of the cornfields. Again, with basketballs, kind of tough guys, kind of different guys, than the characteristic New Orleans folks. And my first memory, again, of Pete as an LSU player, I knew him in high school because he and his dad were recruiting me, and so we spent a little time together, in high school. But here we are, in college, and it's Pete Maravich, his first varsity year, and he's at the free throw line, in the Tulane gym. And do you have any memories of that moment, John?
No, but I have memories of playing him and some of the things Moser did to him.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah.
We're sitting there, obviously after our game, we're watching the game, and Pete is at the free throw line. And Dan Moses just walks up to him and hits him upside the head. That-
Yeah, yeah. A la Caitlin Clark and Chandri, just out of the blue, just came out of nowhere and just gave him a hit. And I guess he was saying, welcome to the Tulane gym. I don't know what he was thinking, but Moser was well known for getting into some fisticuffs. Let's put it that way.
Exactly. And I'm going to ask you to kind of reflect on that. Yes.
Harold, let me
Uh,
tell you a real quick story. You're gonna love this. Moser, one game in Carmen, you'll appreciate. They had a 2-page spread in Sports Illustrated about 20 years ago, and it was about the scoring averages going up and down, the curve of how they were really high at one point, they got lower, they got high again. And the picture was of Maravich against Tulane, and in the picture there are 4 Tulane players. Um, all 4 kind of looking at Pete taking the shot, and it's my friend Billy Fitzgerald, my friend Terry Habig, my teammate Bob Spurk, and Moser. And I'm the only one not in the picture. And so my Moser, when they texted around, said, "Where's Johnny?" And Moser texted back, "Oh, he's on the other end of the court yelling, 'I'm open, I'm open.'" So
oh, yeah.
that was the kind of the sense of humor we were dealing with, Harold. That was
Yeah,
our careers. Those guys were great. They were great. Yeah, I'm on the other end.
absolutely.
I'm wide open, and Pete's taking a shot.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, look, when I was driving at two before, and you mentioned Caitlin Clark, I mean, there was that Caitlin Clark kind of animosity, happening when Pete Maravich was a player, and it occurred to me, and I'll tell you why it occurred to me. When she broke Pete's record, there was a picture in the AP or whatever the distribution service was announcing that she broke Pete Maravich's record, and there it was, one of those Tulane. It was a Tulane gym game because I was wearing white, me guarding Pete. You know, and I'm saying how coincidental. It's essentially the same story, but without a racial component.
Right, exactly.
Um,
I agree. I agree.
what are your thoughts about that? I mean, because I think we have a tendency to layer race on things, that maybe we don't have to. And my suggestion is that component exists, competitively sometimes
Yeah, I think
when there's no other
my
component.
theory, Harold. My theory in all of this is that it's a situation where we didn't have the media exposure, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the public presence that these people have today, these players have today. And I believe that there may have been the same types of feelings. But they weren't pervasive like they are today in terms of the media spreading all of this out. I think we've had, and I'm not by any means someone who's politically inclined, I don't think that as much would be happening, it would be as bad if it weren't so media oriented in terms of just being thrown out there every day um, about
Mhm.
this situation with Caitlin Clark and other players. There's a certain, I guess there's a certain jealousy, but at the same token, there's a frustration, right? I mean, I think there's a frustration too. So because they're saying, well, look at this. Okay, well, now finally we're getting the exposure we should get, that sort of thing. But, that's way beyond my pay grade. I got to be honest with you, in terms of how that can be rectified. But be that as it may, she's fun to watch. I got to admit, she's fun to watch. Angel's fun to watch. Look, if you'd asked me 5 years ago the names of 2 WNBA players, I would not have
Right.
known. I would not. I would have said
Exactly.
I'm not sure. But I know Angel. I know Caitlin. There's Tarazi, I guess. I mean, I could probably name a half a dozen now, but that I couldn't name 6, 7 years ago.
Right.
And that's great. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's really good. So um, I
Yeah, I
think
think there's no question that she's going to be great for the game.
I think so.
No.
I hope it can assimilate properly and they can benefit from it because the girls deserve better recognition because they're good. They're good. And
Right.
it's I guess it's the same old story. A friend of mine and I were talking the other night. I play a lot of tennis, and we started talking about Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King. You remember that old? I don't know if you were around
Mhm.
back then watching tennis and all, but he
Yep.
brought that. But even though it wasn't an equitable arrangement in terms of athleticism, an older guy playing a younger champion, it did bring the notoriety and brought it to the public view. And from that point on, it really made a difference. And I think that's what really helped. So, we've got a duality of women's sports and African American sports and players. And, it's just a matter of how we balance that. And I've got my fingers crossed that we can continue to go in the direction we're going.
Gotcha. Okay. Then let me ask you to focus on that on your senior season, man, because I know you have some anecdotes, about some of the games that we played that year. Already starting with the two the LSU victories. Uh, what do you remember about that game in Baton Rouge
Well,
against LSU and Pete?
Well, in Baton Rouge, I just remember that, and my wife reminds me I didn't invite her to come up to the game, but that I remember that for sure. 54 years later, I still remember that. But be that as it may, I thought that if you remember, Harold, the benches were at the ends of the court. They were under the baskets.
Exactly.
They were not on the sidelines, and
Right.
we actually had a bench clearing fight with them during that game. Unfortunately, our player who started, his name will remain unnamed. It's not you or me, but
Oh, I'm going to name him,
he
John.
started at the other end of the court, in front of the LSU bench. Which, by the time we ran the full 9,500 feet to get to the other end, there were 12 LSU guys already on the court, and we had one guy in the middle getting roughed up. But anyway, that kind of stayed with me over these years. But that was a great game. It was nip and tuck, but it's the only game I ever fouled out of in my career. When I fouled out in that second overtime, and I left it up to you and another sophomore, a guy named Suter, who kind of pulled us through to win that game. That was a lot of fun. But the game I remember, Harold, and I'm sure you remember, is when we went to UCLA and we played at Pauley Pavilion. We played at that time. Lou Alcindor was his name. Sidney Wicks, Curtis Rowe. I mean, it was a heck of a team, and I believe they had won 61 in a row or some crazy number at that point, because they did lose a game or two here and there in those three. But we went out. This is vivid in my memory. We went out for the opening tip, and Harold was jumping center against Lou Alcindor. Alcindor was 7'2". Harold's about what, 6'8", 6'6". So, oh, you're bigger than that. But anyway, he jumped like he was 6'9". But so Harold goes up the center, and his eyeballs are looking at the top of the UCLA letters on Kareem's chest. He looks around Kareem and looks at me and says, "I'm coming to you, Johnny," on the tip. And Alcindor looked down at him like that. And the rest of it was history. They beat us pretty badly, but we had some fun. But we did do this, Harold. I don't. We scored the first 2 points. Do you remember this? The tip, the tip, the tip. Yeah, it was mishandled, and I got a hold of it, and I dribbled down and took about a 12-foot jump shot and made it. And we were up 2-0 against UCLA, the number one team in the nation. And I was running back up court, and one of my teammates, Terry Habig, is backtracking, heading back to play defense, and he says, "We got him, we got him." Needless to say, that was not true, but we did. That was a fun time, a good group of guys. But our senior year, we had one of the toughest schedules in the country, if you remember. They told us, I think it was Street and Smith Basketball Magazine was what it was called way back then. And when they talked about our team, they said the Tulane Green Wave team is playing one of the toughest schedules in the country. And we went everywhere. I mean, we went to UCLA, we went to Georgia Tech, Florida State, NC State, NC, Marquette. We played a good schedule. It was a tough schedule, but it was. Yeah, yep. They were good. They were all good. So we got some good, and then of course played LSU twice. And Georgia Tech was good back then. They had just gotten out of the SEC. That's if you remember when you got there, we were not. My freshman year, we were still in the SEC, but my sophomore year, we were not.
Well, anyhow,
Before I forget something, let me ask you a quick question. Um,
huh?
one of the reasons I went to Tulane was because I was from New Orleans and I wanted my family, not wanted my family, I knew my family could get to see me play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the most heartwarming things of my career was when they retired my jersey. My parents were in the stands, and they were sitting in the same seats, which was cool. Um,
Gotcha.
but did you go to Tulane because of that too, or did you just want, you felt academically it was the place to go, or you wanted to be home?
And, neither. I actually, and again, it kind of combines with some of the things that we're working on in terms of the Steve Martin story. Integration wasn't happening. And there was a lot of pressure, to kind of make it happen. And a lot of that pressure in New Orleans came from St. Aug, from St. Augustine High School. And so we were kind of coerced, again, to be a part of the integration. And that is the prime reason that got me there. But it became a campaign. Once I, committed, to that as mission, and stuff. And this is, you're talking about, a mission statement from a 17-year-old. I don't know what, the real value of that is. And so, but it worked out. There was a campaign. There absolutely was a mission.
Okay.
Because it got to the point where I only applied. I had all those offers, and you know how they were back then. Everybody and their mama, would come to your house and do those kinds of things. Got down to the fact that I applied to two schools, and it was Tulane and Harvard. Which Times-Picayune turned to Tulane and Howard, curiously. But,
Oh, gee.
but right. Uh, so that was the choice and the challenge. Again, all at the same time. Well, that's it.
Well, you
That's
handled it well, and you handled it with class. And honestly, I didn't have any clue. I just thought, back then, Harold, that you were looking to go to Tulane because you were from New Orleans. You had wanted a good education, and but I had no idea that there was, quote, the mission situation involved, and that you handled that kind of behind the scenes, I think, for the most part.
well.
But behind my scene, let's put it that way, behind, as far as we knew, because we never, you lived in the dorm with us, right down, you
Right.
were next door. You and Stan were next door to Mitch and me, and
Exactly.
it was just basketball in class, going to class and
Right.
playing ball and playing baseball and practicing. Is what mine was. Yours is obviously much more important and detailed than mine was, but that's
But
interesting.
John, if we sat down, with a glass of wine, we could probably pick out some moments, when those currents, were more apparent. 'Cause, I can remember some,
Okay.
some interactions that, again, that we all had. But I'm not sure it's right for 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 this conversation,
Okay.
since I'm supposed to be asking the questions. And so, but there were, again, even it was the times. I mean, all the demonstrations that were going on in the quad, the anti-war stuff, the civil rights stuff. I mean, the campus was alive, in a lot of different ways. But you've got to, I think, be specific, about what the currents were. I think to do any kind of in depth, on them. There were a lot of things going on behind the scenes that I think, even African American students were not aware of, let alone, the general population. But, once again, I think, conversation, again, for another time, if you don't mind.
No, that's
And
fine.
I'd love to have a conversation, another conversation as well. You
Absolutely.
know,
Absolutely. Very, very interesting and enlightening, Terrell. Very enlightening.
gotcha, gotcha. But so let me ask you to pick up the basketball trail, man, and tell us about your transition from college to the pros.
Well,
Uh,
that was interesting. It was a situation. I don't know if you remember, but my freshman coach at Tulane became the assistant coach with the Milwaukee Bucks, Tom Nasalki,
Mr.
um,
Tom Nasalki.
who you didn't have as a coach as a freshman. I don't think. Did you? He was a
Oh, he was the coach that recruited me.
Was he? Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So Tom knew me, and we played in Marquette, if you remember, at the very end of our senior year. Um,
right.
and Costello, the coach of the Bucks, was there at the game with Tom. And Tom even called me after that game and said, "Look, the Bucks may be interested because we need a shooting guard." And I said, "Well, that's
Right.
great. I can shoot, but I'm not a guard. I played forward my whole career, high school and college. But
Right.
so unfortunately, I was drafted. I was drafted by the ABA, um, the New Orleans Buccaneers, and the Milwaukee Bucks. And I often thought back that if I had stayed with the New Orleans Buccaneers, I wonder if I'd have been someone who had a solo artist in this, in that I played my grammar school ball, my high school ball, my college ball, and then I could have played my pro ball all in the city of New Orleans, which would have been pretty
Mhm.
unique. But at the time, Lou Alcindor had been drafted by the Bucks and had already signed, and that was kind of enough for me to say, you know what, if I'm going to go try this, I'm going to play. I'm going to play with the big boys. I chose to play for Milwaukee. They signed me. I signed for a $2,500 signing bonus. um, it was a make good contract, meaning I had to make the team. With the New Orleans Bucks, I had what was called a no cut. I was guaranteed to play on, be on the team and not and be paid. But Milwaukee
Right.
was not. It was a make good contract. So I was fortunate enough to make the team, and you know we did some. There's so many things that happened in that. For instance, I'm gonna give you a quick anecdotal story about in training camp. We ran a 330, I think it was a 330. It was one time around a track, and then we ran also a as long as you could run situation. But anyway, the point being that everything we did seemed to be with alphabetical order. So when we ran the 330 around the track in training camp, it was Alcindor Arthurs. So I ran against Lou around a full track, and he beat me
Right.
by about a step and a half.
Wow.
He was the second fastest time on the team. The first fastest time was a kid out of Indiana or Iowa who ran it, and then I finished third because I was so close to Lou in the finish. I finished third of the three times running around that track. They later
Wow.
said that those times were better than the Green Bay Packer linebacker in their training camp. So that shows you how
Wow.
fast Alcindor was, and around
Uh-huh.
that track. Now, aside from that, we also had to run for as long as you could run after that. Yeah, yes. And so when we did
Right.
the distance, run as long as you could run, Alcindor refused to do it. He didn't even do it. He said, I can't do it. The rest of us, did whatever minutes we did. But anyway, we did that. But that aside, that's kind of why I roomed with Alcindor, because when we went on the first road trip, we were in Cope playing in Detroit, the Pistons. We got off the bus, and the equipment manager said, "All right, here are your room assignments," and it was Alcindor Arthurs. So Lou and I roomed together for like 4 or 5 road trips, including about a 9-day trip on the West Coast. We
Wow.
played L.A., Seattle, Phoenix, Golden State, which was back then San Francisco Warriors. But anyway, I did room with him for those road trips, and that in itself was an experience because Harold, I guess the similarities are there in that he was so far above me in terms of world experience, meaning he was dealing with Muhammad Ali and Bill Russell, and there was a senator out of New York that used to come in the
Right.
locker room all of the time. Adam Clayton Powell. Do you remember that name at all? Adam Clayton Powell. Yep, and
Gotcha.
he would come in, but
Absolutely.
anyway, and so here I am, you know, rooming with Lou with Alcindor, and sometimes he would tell me, "Do you mind bringing me dinner back? Because I'm tired
Is
of
your
people
purple button still
saying, 'Hey, how
at the
tall are
top?
you? Is it raining up there?' You know, that kind of stuff back then." Um,
You
he
ever
he
put
has
spinach
since
above the
really
button?
adjusted,
Right.
I think, greatly in terms of he was an introvert back then, sort of. But now, you know, his personality is
Right.
coming out, and he was a personable guy, very bright, but an introvert. Even back, you know, those early days, but he was
Mhm.
still a very active, you know, he was active like you were in civil rights and at the time. But um, that was quite an experience. I will have to say I was very lucky to experience that. I think it opened my eyes quite a bit. Um, you have probably seen him and talked with him
Right.
more than I have since then, Harold, because obviously out in L.A. We've Lou and I have crossed paths maybe once or twice, and I usually have to introduce myself. That's how, you know, how long that's been. 60 years ago, you know. Oh, yeah, I remember you. He did send me an autographed version of one of his books, and he signed it. And he said, "Johnny, 1969 was a long time ago, wasn't it, Lou?" No, Kareem. Excuse me, Kareem. He signed it Kareem. But anyway, it was a long time ago. So, but
That's
Milwaukee
true.
was a good experience, and I wish I had been able to play the entire season. But you know, I got not drafted, but I got called to active duty. Um, Milwaukee got me in a National Guard unit, and
Mm.
two of us had to go to active duty, basic training during the season. To my roommate, one of my teammates, and myself. And so that was kind of one of the things that I did that I really wish I had been able to stay the whole season, because in the off season they traded me to the Pistons,
Right.
and I went to Detroit, and that's when Bob Lanier was a rookie. If you remember that name, Bob Lanier came in as a rookie. So I went through training camp with the
Absolutely.
Pistons, and you know, I hurt my back, and it was long story short is the handwriting was on the wall for me to get back to New Orleans. But that time period, those 2 years, the first year I was not married, the second year I was married. Um, I wouldn't trade them for anything, even though they were
Mhm.
not as long as a career as I would like to have had. But the experience, the life experience, was well worth it.
Gotcha, man. Well, and let me tell you a memory that I still hold of you in Milwaukee. I don't know if you remember, but that year we came back to play Marquette, and you were with the Bucks, and we came to watch a practice.
I remember the
You
practice
have
when
any
we
memory
came.
of that?
Yes.
Gotcha. You know, because
Yep.
Tom
Yep.
Masaki obviously was the assistant, and one of the things I remember is that he and Ralph Peterson, our head coach in college, were not really friendly.
Right.
Again,
Right.
during that interaction, uh,
Right.
something apparently had gone down. But the big memories first, having you in that other environment with Kareem, our former enemy, uh, and so, but also, maybe you being in that mix with one of my all-time heroes,
Yeah.
Oscar Robertson.
Well,
Uh,
uh,
what was that
it's funny you
experience
say.
like
I
for
have
you?
the one picture I have of me in action in Milwaukee was the year before when Oscar was with Cincinnati, and the picture is me with the ball,
Okay.
Alcindor at the post about 10 feet away from me, and Oscar following me. He was guarding me. So I'm in the picture with Lou Alcindor, or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Oscar Robertson, and me. And I often ask people, you know, can you name all three of these NBA players? As a matter of fact, a friend of ours, if you remember,
Mm.
um, who owned a restaurant bar out on West End, we gave him the picture, and I said, uh, if anybody can name all three of us at one time, I think they need to get a free beer. And so we had this picture up on the bar at West End Cafe, Harold. You probably remember it. And one day, some guy
Mhm.
came in and he knew all three guys, and
Mhm.
so our friend Dickie, gave him a beer, a free beer for that picture. But I didn't play with Oscar. Oscar came the year I went to Detroit. So the year that I was there, he was still at Cincinnati.
Yeah,
And I will tell you this: I roomed with a guy named Bobby Dandridge. Do you remember Bobby? From Norfolk State. Bobby was an
I
All-Pro,
remember.
but he was from Norfolk State. And in rookie camp, I roomed with Bobby. And to this day, I can remember Bobby calling a friend in South Carolina saying it didn't look good. He didn't know if he was going to make the team because we were all rookies. It was rookie camp, trying to make the cut for the spring train. And he was and
Mhm.
Bobby went on to become an All-Pro. I mean, he literally thought he might not make that team that year because in rookie camp he thought he was going to get sent home, and he didn't, obviously, and became an All-Pro. But that was my rookie camp experience with
Amazing.
Milwaukee, and then we had spring training, which was spring preseason practice, which came after that, right before the season, and that's when we did, Alcindor and Kareem and Lou and I actually roomed it together in training camp because we were alphabetical order, and then we roomed again on the road trips before I left. But again, those guys were most interesting, and we had four rookies on the Bucks that year. Um, we had four rookies that made the roster,
Gotcha.
so it was a good time.
Okay. What was your relationship
Well,
with Wayne Embry?
no, Wayne came
You know,
in.
was
Wayne
he on
came
that
in the
team?
next year. But
Was
I
he?
mean, I knew Wayne because Wayne was involved in my trade. When they traded me that summer, Wayne was there, but he was not there during the season that I was
Mhm.
there. But when I got traded in the summer, Wayne was the GM then at that time, so I didn't get to really know Wayne, but I did actually. Now that you're making me go back and jog my memory, after the Pistons released me, the Bucks picked me back up on waivers, and I went back to Milwaukee and I played in what's now called the
Mhm.
developmental league. Back then, it was not the developmental league; it was called the Continental League, and it was the Milwaukee's minor league team, so to speak. And we played, in Des Moines, Iowa. We played in Rockford, Illinois. We played in Madison, Wisconsin. But Wayne was the GM of the
Right.
Bucks that year, and I was on the developmental team that year. Didn't get called up, unfortunately, because that's the year they won it. That's the year the famous Willis Reed walk out on the
Gotcha.
court in the Garden with the bad leg. That was the year. That was the year I was there,
Right.
and we lost. And then the next year they won it with Alcindor, who had then changed his name to Kareem at that point.
Gotcha. So you're here in the developmental
Yes,
league.
Oscar was at
Was
Milwaukee, and
Oscar
I was
at
I
Milwaukee
was
then?
praying to get called up. I mean, I was hoping like heck I could get called up, because they got a ring that year, and
Gotcha.
they won everything, and I was hoping to get called up,
Gotcha.
but I didn't get the
Gotcha.
call, and that's kind of when I knew, uh, you know, at the end of the developmental league season that probably wasn't going to work out as what and came back to New Orleans and went to work in the city that I love.
I got you. Got you. But now you see the end of this story matches my memory. You know, because when we went back to Marquette, I remember you, Kareem,
Hmm.
Wayne
Hmm.
Embry, and Oscar Robertson.
And the Salkins.
Tom Misaki, of
Yeah.
course. Right. So, I mean, I can hold on to memory. I may have to piece it
Listen, we,
together a
we're
little bit
we're
more.
given we're given some leeway, Arrow.
You
You're almost as old as I am, so we have that right to forget things.
Ex- exactly. 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 Very, very cool. So, John, so how has life been? I mean, again, since you get back to New Orleans and very successful in the real estate business, you tell me a little bit about that, and what life after, successful college and a pro career
Yeah, well, again,
has
that,
been
that
like for
reflects
all these
back on one
years.
of the reasons probably that was a good idea for me to go to Tulane is I never lost my contacts in the city. I never lost connection with the city. When I came back, was first
Right.
went into banking, and the guy who hired me, Harold, was Bob Pettit. He was the chairman of the board of the bank,
Wow.
and I came back and I called him up one day and I said, "Look, I'm looking for something." And he said, "Look, why don't you try banking?" So from my first 6 years back in New Orleans, I was in the banking business and worked with Bob.
Oh,
And he was the chairman of Mr. LSU, right?
Mr.
He's still one of
LSU.
the greatest players of all time, obviously, and one of the nicest guys of all time, too, I might
Right.
add. But then after that, I went to real
Mm.
estate. I did some things on my own. Became a commercial real estate broker here in the city, and did that for like 45 years. But again, the connection to the city, the contacts here in the city, were fruitful for me in terms of my experience at Tulane, De La Salle Tulane, and my career in general. I can't say that didn't assist me in my endeavors in business, in the commercial real estate business. And all the while I was, following Tulane and back in Tulane too. I never lost that connection. I've always been fortunate to have great connections at Tulane, and that's been certainly rewarding for me.
Right. Gotcha. Are you
No,
still
I'm
dabbling
totally
in
retired.
real estate?
I just gave, just cut cut cut
Okay.
everything off at one time. So yeah, no, I'm not doing any real estate. I still have some
Okay.
holdings, of course, but nothing that I'm doing actively. I'm not involved. I have some properties and such, but I'm not doing any active sales, anything like that. I play tennis. I play
Gotcha.
tennis and I
Gotcha.
fish. I became a fisherman, Harold. I don't know if you fish. Man, I fish. I love to fish.
Beautiful.
I have a little boat in Delacroix, and just like to catch my fish. And nothing better for me to be out on that water and catch, on a pretty day and catch some fish. So I do that between that and my tennis. That keeps me. And the grandkids. Got six grandkids now. Four girls in Thibodeau and two boys in Charleston. And obviously, just following them. I wish they were here. I would love to be able to
Mm.
see more of their activities locally, but that's kind of takes up a lot of our travel time. We drive back and forth to Thibodeau and Charleston to see the kids. So that's been fun. And I'm like you. I think you don't you have a doctor in your family? One, yep. And my son
Got
is a
one.
doctor in
Yep.
Thibodeau. And again, you look back at Tulane and the education you
Beautiful.
got, and you got to be thankful for the opportunities that they did present. That maybe you wouldn't have had without it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, John, again, what was it like the first day you stepped on to the court? So I know that sometimes we have expectations about what do we think is gonna be like. What was your first day like, and what did you think your future was gonna be like from that
That's
first
a great question.
first
I'm glad you asked that because I
impression?
have good memories of that. Um, I guess the most interesting thing I would say, Carmen, is that my freshman year, there were seven scholarship players. So we had seven scholarship freshmen who came in my freshman year. And after I signed with Tulane, the first thought that crossed my mind is, boy, I hope I can play. We're bringing in seven guys, and you look at the credentials, and I'm reading about these guys, and I'm thinking, gosh, this is quite a group. I'm looking at the varsity that they have, and I'm thinking, well, I'll get a good education, and I'm going to try hard and do whatever I can, but I'm going to hope for the best. And so when we showed up, um, those seven guys, Carmen, we were undefeated our freshman year. We beat LSU twice, Georgia Tech twice. We beat everybody on our schedule, and we went 19-0. And frankly, one of the reasons we played UCLA my senior year was because we were rated as one of the best freshman teams in the country, as well. Of course, UCLA was the best team by far. They were the best team on campus, and they were a freshman team, and the seniors had won the national championship. So when Alcindor was a freshman, they were by far the best team on that campus, but they were still freshmen and not able to play varsity. But we were well renowned as a freshman team. So I think that's how we inevitably got to go to UCLA and play UCLA because that freshman class was such a fun class. And I have retained those connections with all seven guys. Two are deceased, but to this day we still stay together. But honestly, when I first walked on that court, my first thought was, I hope I can play.
But I
Well,
mean, you are all
yeah, but there were
American in
some All
high school,
Americans also
really.
who signed. And you don't know. In New Orleans, we play. Like I said, like Harold and I would discuss it. It was a pretty localized experience. We played. We didn't know how good those guys were necessarily from Florida or Indiana or North Carolina when they came in. And I didn't. And now, it didn't last long. Not be honestly. A couple of scrimmages, and you
Yeah, right,
knew where the chips were going to fall eventually, but you didn't know for sure,
right, right.
even through preseason until you started playing games, and then you knew obviously that the order was set. But honestly, the first few days of after signing and reading about who's coming in, my first step on that court to practice for the first time was, well, this is gonna. I hope I can play. I mean, honestly, I hope I can play. So fortunately, it worked.
But you are also a two-sport athlete, so how did you transition from basketball to baseball? Because I know those
They did cross a
seasons kind
little,
of
and
cross a
one of the
little
things
bit.
I think about in hindsight is I wonder what it would be like to have been a basketball player year round or a baseball player year round, like the kids do today. Today these kids play 12 months a year. That's all they do. They play basketball. Whereas what we would do is for 5 months do basketball, take maybe a month, off a little bit, but never touch a ball for another 6 months. So, but I wouldn't give that
Wow.
up either because I always tell people that baseball was a more sociable sport for me than basketball. Basketball was a much more intense is not the word, but a more competitive situation, person on person, man to man on man, woman on woman in basketball, whatever. That was whereas in baseball you're a little detached. You're not facing the person, up front and close and personal like we do in basketball. And also the practices in baseball are kind of slow, where you stand around, you can talk back and forth. In basketball, it's one thing after the other. You're doing drills, you're working, you don't have the conversation opportunities. So baseball to me was a more sociable, probably a sport that I really enjoyed from that aspect as well. Basketball, it was just in my blood. I just loved basketball, and I liked the competition, and I liked the playing, and that was just to me was if I had to choose the two, it would have been basketball for sure, in my mind. But baseball, we had a couple of two-sport guys back then. We had one quarterback who played football, and myself. So
Okay.
there was more of that going on. You don't have quite as much of it as you used to back then. But playing two sports was not a big burden because, if you're playing baseball, practicing and playing games, if you're not, you're probably shooting baskets anyway. So your time was going to be occupied by the sport that you were involved besides the studies, of course.
And so I know you played baseball. What was it like specifically? What you guys traveled a bit? What were some of the relationships that you developed on the baseball team? We talked a lot about the basketball players, but what were some of
Well,
the
baseball was
relationships you
different.
developed with
Baseball had
baseball?
3.5 scholarships back then. We had 13 in basketball even back then. So the guys who played baseball, some of them didn't have room and board. Some of them only had tuition. They kind of split it up, and I think that went on for a while. Baseball still, I don't think, has many scholarships compared to the other sports. But so we didn't really have that socialization opportunity with the baseball players, except at a practice or a game. Whereas in basketball, as Harold and I, you know, can say, we roomed together, right next to each other. We were on the same floor. We were in the dorm together, so there was more interaction. So in baseball, we didn't quite have that same situation. We didn't travel. We didn't fly in baseball. We always drove in baseball, so it was a very regionalized schedule. We would play Florida State, we would play Alabama, we would play LSU, but we didn't go like in basketball and play a national schedule like we did in basketball. So baseball was a little different in that respect, and I may only remember two guys in baseball who lived in the dorm. So the rest of the team, and I think
Okay.
my junior year when a fellow named Steve Martin, who was an African American athlete playing baseball, the only African American athlete playing baseball at the time, he would not live on campus. He didn't live on campus because he was like the other 12 guys on the team, 15 guys. They didn't have scholarships to live in the dorm, so they had to go home at night. It was a commuter experience. So that there was less interaction,
Okay.
in that respect. Again, it was, and this is kind of interesting. Do you know in baseball back then we played 18 games a year? Now they play 60.
Oh
They
wow.
win 60 and lose 10. I mean, they play 70,
Right.
but we played 18 games a year. So that meant we had 5 days of practice, boring days of, practice is not as much fun as games. So we would practice 5 days a week and play 2 games a week. It was, but back then that's all we knew. That was it. That was our game, 18 game schedule.
That's amazing. When you when you were playing, so you when
Well,
were
that
you
was
all
that was my
American
senior
in
year. That was just
basketball?
my senior
What
year.
years?
Yeah, in high school senior year and
Your
my college
senior year.
senior year. Those are the
So
years I was All American.
so when you were playing your senior year and you were coming on your last game, what were the feelings at that time
Well,
when
I'm
you
gonna
were
take you
playing
back a
your
little before that
last
last game to
game?
give you my feelings. And this is kind of, I think, to me, became more
Okay.
interesting. When we played LSU that night, Harold, and we beat them 110 to 94 when Maravich got 66, it was one of the first regionalized TV games in the Southeast. That game was on television. I've had people from Gulfport, Mississippi tell me they saw the game. But my point was, after the game, they interviewed me. A guy named Wayne Mack was the announcer, and he interviewed me. And he said, "You had a great game, et cetera, et cetera. Congratulations." And Coach Babe McCarthy was in the stands watching the game. Babe McCarthy was the coach of the New Orleans Buccaneers, the pro team in New Orleans. That is the first thought I ever had of playing pro ball. I had never thought of playing professionally
Okay.
until that
Mm.
day when the announcer told me that the pro coach was sitting in the stand. So from that point on, which we only had about 8 more games left, maybe 6 more games in the season, wasn't that many left. But from that point on, that was in the back of my mind was the fact that, well, maybe there's something beyond Tulane. Maybe I can, go on and play. So but the last game was emotional. Of course, we had one, two, three, four, five. We had 6 seniors of the 7 freshmen who were seniors that year, senior night, and that was really fun and emotional for us. And of course, my family again was in the stands, which made it really worthwhile for me. But yeah, they introduced the six seniors, and I just finally remember that was a culmination of a wonderful experience. My 4 years at Tulane.
So how do you feel like you were celebrated and your legacy
Oh,
stamped
um,
at Tulane?
well, all you gotta do is look up in the rafters and you see that 31. That's got to tell you something. Um, I think I was given more than I was due,
Definitely.
but yeah,
I
it's
don't. You did great. You did great. I mean, there hasn't
well,
been a lot of
it's been
All-Americans
fun
at
supporting
Tulane.
Tulane too, because without Tulane, a lot of my life would not have happened. So it's a lot of fun for me to watch the kids and how hard they work, to achieve because we can identify with that. Terrell and I can certainly identify with that of how hard you work to perfect your skills, and those kids are doing the same thing. So that's fun to support that.
So, what type of things have you done in the past? I'm sure monetary support, but beyond monetary
Well,
support
it,
with the
it
team
varies
throughout the
depending on the
years.
coaches. Some of the coaches are I was more involved with. I've always been with the Green Wave Club and involved with any kind of booster situation I can. But one coach to another, and unfortunately, we haven't. Perry Clark was the longest coach, tenured coach that I've been around since I left Tulane, and of course, we still stay in touch. He's always admired Perry's work here, but if I can give them some support, I always contact the coach. I make sure they at least know that I'm available if I can be of any assistance. Sometimes they ask me to come out and visit with the kids. Sometimes I don't hear back, but it's up to the coach to decide that. But yeah, I've tried to support them as much as I can, and it's a two-way street as far as I'm concerned with the university and myself and my life. We both share rewards from our experience, I think.
Have the student athletes been receptive about the knowledge that you can impart on them, and what have been some of your experiences with
Well, that's
student
been kind of the
athletes
best part. I mean, when
throughout the
you really
years?
get to meet the kids as opposed to watching them on the court or on the field, to me, that's really the most enjoyable thing. Now, years ago, we used to be able to be much more active, where we could bring the kids to the house and have dinners and get to socialize with them. And then the NCAA, stepped down on that, and we had to back away. I think now it's kind of I would leave it to the younger people to be more active anyway. But yeah, they're usually receptive. You can see in the twinkle in their eye. I wonder what this old guy's going to say. Tell me about how I can shoot my jump shot. But it's still fun to speak with them because they're more than just basketball players. The kids they're just interesting to me. So the more times I get to meet with them and visit, the more I enjoy that.
Excellent. And again, I'm pushing you on legacy. I want you to tell me a little bit about I mean, we know the data, we know the stats. I'm talking about you personally. When they talk about John authors at Tulane, what are some of the things that you hope that they consider
Um,
you
well,
as?
I think it's going to be hard for them to understand my situation. Um, I would hope that they, and I know they do when I do speak with the kids and we're on the court, and the coach always says, by the way, that's his number up there. Um, I get a little better attention, I guess, maybe because of that. But for the most part, the kids are they're very inquisitive in terms of what it was like in the old days. Not so much what can you help me with now. It's more like, oh, how was what was Maravich like? What was the gym like? How that kind of stuff. So. But Carmen, to answer your question a little more fully, I'm not involved as much as I used to be with the program. Um, I'm certainly willing to be involved to the extent of the kids, but it's a whole different dynamic now with the kids and like when we were playing. It's there's just so many things going on that they have, and even reverting back to the internet and so forth. There's just so many things that keep them occupied and they're busy. It's not like the old days. So I don't mind that. I understand that. It doesn't bother me in the least. Um, I just hope that some of those kids that when they leave Tulane, they still have the same affinity that Harold and I have for the university and the fact that we experienced we had a good experience when we were at Tulane.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what we really want to see happen with all the student athletes. That they have some affinity and want to reach back. It's not always going to be a great basketball experience. However, when you meet people and you play with your teammates, that should always have
Yes.
a
Yeah.
lasting
Yeah.
impact on you.
You're like I said earlier on about, your sports career involves the people that have crossed your path during that entire career. Well, that's the same thing about a teammate. I mean, there's no better fraternity than a teammate. Um, so, so
I
I've
think that's
always made
right.
that connection,
Yeah.
and you never forget teammates. And I think Carmen, you and Harold and Jim, we all know that's part of the rewards of playing sports is the teammates. Carmen, thank you, Carmen. You're welcome.
Thank you, John.
Good
We're
answers
gonna have
means
to
you
talk
ask
soon.
good questions.
About Steve Martin for just a second.
Sure.
Okay, because
That'd be great.
let, let me just give you a couple of quick. Like I said, the point being that baseball we didn't socialize quite as much as we did in basketball. Um, my experience with Steve was our
Right.
center fielder. I was a sophomore. Steve was a junior, and of course he was the first African American athlete at Tulane, not scholarship athlete. You were the first scholarship athlete.
Good.
And Steve, and I vaguely remember, and I'm
Correct.
gonna pick your brain, Harold. Was there a fellow named Ike, someone else who played baseball from St. Aug? Okay. Okay. Then,
Not in my
did
time,
you know
though.
Steve at St. Aug? Okay. Well, but there was
I
another
did.
African American who practiced with us when I was a freshman. He was practicing with the varsity, but he didn't make the team. But Steve, of course, made the team. Steve was a good player, but Steve was
But,
our center fielder, and I obviously didn't know Jackie Robinson, but Steve handled it probably as like he was handled it. He was low key, um, very bright, of course, and was our one of our leaders on our team because he was so smart and um, he hustled. I mean, the guy was fast. Steve was fast. So Steve wasn't a great hitter, but he was a great defensive player. He and I had a lot in common. We one we didn't hit real well. We used to hit like 280 or whatever, but we could play defense. And Steve was covered center field like nobody else and he was the best center fielder we ever had at Tulane, as far as I'm concerned. But the story I wanted to tell you about Steve was the summer of my freshman year, the summer of Steve's sophomore year. We played in a league called the All American Baseball Association League. It's called the AABA, and it's currently still around. And it was a group of teams that gave us the opportunity to play baseball in the summers because minor leagues were not like college kids now go off and play in the minors, and they play in these little minor league programs and leagues all over the country. We didn't have that. So New Orleans has this league, and it's called AABA, and it's still in existence today. A guy named Rag Sherman was the coach. He was the Loyola baseball coach for 35 years. He coached the AABA team. Steve made that team as well as I did. So Steve again was the only the only African American on that team. But he was our leadoff hitter. The tournament was held in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, every year. So we go to Johnstown. On the way up, we go by bus, a 26-hour bus ride from New Orleans to Johnstown, Pennsylvania. We stop at Annapolis and we go to the Naval Academy and we play the Naval Academy a couple of games. Enjoyed the eating with the plebes in the the cafeteria, the dining hall. A great experience. We go to Johnstown. There are like 8 teams in the tournament: Detroit, New York, D.C., Chicago, New Orleans, mostly from the Northeast. First pitch of the first game that we play in, Steve Martin hits a home run. The very first pitch. So, to me,
Wow.
it came full circle in terms of, here's a guy going up now up in the AAB in Johnstown. There were other African American players. See, when we went down to New Orleans when we were playing, typically we did not play African American players. But when we got to play Detroit, New York, D.C., Chicago, we were they were there. But when our first batter was Steve Martin, and when he hits the very first pitch, not the first at bat, but the first pitch over the fence. That's my fondest recollection
Beautiful.
of Steve.
That's
Other than also seeing him at the Tulane basketball games. He was
right.
always a supporter. And I used to always visit with him and sit and chit chat with Steve back then too at the games. I miss Steve. Great guy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that story. That's a great story.
Yes, absolutely. That was my point. And that's what I heard about Jackie Robinson, that he was quiet and just handled his business. But Steve was very quiet. And again, Harold, probably like you and me, I was probably not aware of some of the things that Steve was going through, honestly, as the only African American.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, Steve was, well, it's like Harold. I mean, they weren't afraid to say their part. I mean, Steve was not the captain of the team. I think, Harold, you were captain your senior year. But he was still, he was not a guy in the background. Steve was, there at every practice, we would, like I said, it was a sociable sport. So at practice, the banter would go back and forth between everybody, but again, I had utmost respect for Steve in that the way he handled himself, and became, as successful as he did, and again, I revert back to, I hope and I think he would have attributed that to his Tulane education.
Right. And John, I'm going to ask this question just to get kind of a different angle on what might be your answer. Did you have a sense at all that he was tortured,
You
or
mean,
were there obvious indications that
no,
it was a stressful
absolutely not.
situation for him?
Absolutely not. Harold is, and
Okay.
frankly, I think if I would have been aware of that, I would hope I would have helped out more or done more or been more of a participant in that quote struggle. But no, I was not aware, frankly, of any
Right.
issues, the way you handled it, the way Steve handled it, in the background going on, with any of my teammates like you and Steve. But maybe that's just a naivete of
Right.
of my naivete. I don't know.
But I share it as well, man. Because as I tell his son and everybody, that ask, I was not nearly aware of how sensitive he was to the stuff that was going on around him. I think he handled it a little bit differently than I did. I think he was more introspective, and even more quiet about
Really? See,
it, and more in
wow.
pain and stuff. That
We do need to have that glass of wine and sit down, Harold.
right, right. Yeah, and again, I love to do that. But yeah, and that's a part of our exploration. Because a couple of things, and I'll tell you, when I got there, Steve asked me if I would be his roommate, and so it was a protective measure, for me. And my answer is, and this is one of my regrets, because I didn't understand, the pain that he might have been in. I thought that it would be better, for us, to be a part of our teams, rather than segregate ourselves, doing this quote unquote experiment, or whatever the hell it was. So I said no, and you know what the dorm experience, was like, and I certainly, and I think you remember, I
No,
certainly was not a tortured being.
except for the roommate you had,
And so,
except for the
I mean, I
roommate they
felt
gave you.
uh, once we got rid of him, life got better. So and I got my lifelong roommate. So, yeah, and then the other thing was, that I knew about Steve. Well, my regret was that I did not consider more, being his roommate. I still think it would have been a mistake, but had I known what I know now, it probably would have made
Interesting.
some
That's
difference.
interesting.
And then the other, and I'm not sure this is actually reactive, but he asked another thing, that I said no to, that I wish I had, with Stephen, was that he approached me about going in with him to form a sports agency. So this is after he got out of business school, and he was an MBA, and just had a thought about the future of that industry and the potential of that industry. And I wish I had been smarter about it, and understood it. But anyhow, that's a regret. A regret. And the sadness for me is that
Yeah.
I don't think he ever got to doing that. I mean, essentially on his own. And when you look at what, the way the world is today, could have been interesting, if we had gone down that path.
Well, is
And that's that.
his family still around in New Orleans, Harold? Steve? Good.
His family is still very much present, uh,
Okay.
and not so much in New Orleans. I think mom is in, his wife is
Okay.
now in Atlanta most of the
All
time.
right.
His son is in Chicago. C. Martin Jr. Again is in Chicago, but they've still got
In New
pretty
Orleans. Yeah.
substantial
Okay.
New Orleans
Interesting. Yeah.
roots. Yeah, yeah, right. But
No,
I
Steve
thought
was
that
one
you
year
guys were the
older. Steve
same
was one
year.
year older.
Yeah,
We played 2 years.
okay,
2 years of
gotcha.
baseball.
Yep, gotcha. Okay.
One year we had 7 New Orleans guys, Harold, on the baseball starters on the baseball team. Steve's junior year, we had 7 New
Wow.
Orleanians who started because the lack of scholarships. The recruiting had to be done with local kids and getting them to come walk on. And of course, it's different now. But
Hmm.
but we had 7 kids from the whole infield was from New Orleans. I mean, we had everybody from the catcher, the pitchers, the shortstop. Third, we were all from New Orleans. But that's changed obviously over the years. But Steve was. I couldn't tell you who our captain was my junior year. I just don't remember in baseball.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Well, I want to abridge, that one of the LSU stories, John.
Uh
That
huh.
101.99 game, when the guy that you don't want to mention, uh, punched Pete in the face and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I
We, we,
can't. I still don't want to mention any names, but yeah, that's
I'll defer to you, and I won't mention. Well, I won't. I won't. I really won't. But we were full court pressing, when that happened, and unnamed player was next to me, and Pete and his teammate were doing some tricky out of bounds play, and our unknown player just hauled off and punched him in the face. And once again, we were right in front of that LSU bench, which was at the end of the court, and so when our unnamed player hit Pete, I'm looking at him saying, "What the? We are in trouble." And so, of course, the bench came at us immediately, and stuff. So we're backpedaling and stuff, and and they got to us, and we both went down. And so the next thing I remember, from that is somebody got on top of me, and started screaming at me, "Keep still, keep still, keep still." And I think it was Jack O'Leary.
He
Do
was
you remember
assistant coach. Yeah, assistant coach.
the
Yeah,
coach O'Leary?
I remember.
Exactly. And so unnamed player and I spent the rest of the game on our backs, with coaches on top, as you guys were fighting. It seemed like everybody in the stands. Uh, you know, uh, and again, that's my memory. And I remember
Yes,
it took a
yes, I do
long
remember
time to
that.
restart the
Yeah,
game. You know, state police
yeah,
came in, and
yeah.
that whole kind of thing. It was a very interesting evening.
And the game in New
Yeah.
Orleans was nothing.
Oh,
It was
man.
clean and quiet, and not a thing happened in the last game at home. So
Exactly.
was that your birthday? I'll be
And
darned.
on my birthday.
I'll be darned.
It was my birthday, February 10th. Yeah. Wow. Man, well, this has been wonderful,
You,
John.
you,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
my
good
pleasure.
catching
And
up.
Carmen, it was
Yeah,
wonderful to meet
and
you face to face, so to speak. And Jim, you as well.
Yes.
right,
All right,
gotcha.
John. I'm gonna have to
And
roll up on you
I
the
will
next
call
time
you
I
up,
see you at a
and
game.
Yeah,
I'll actually bring the
that's right.
wine
We'll have a
next
glass
time
of
we're in
wine.
town.
We'll have a glass of wine.
Gotcha.